Alrighty, today we'll be ranking the $4 villages. There's quite a lot of cards in Dominion that are basically village with a little bonus, 4/4. Sometimes you'll see more than one in the same kingdom, so it's kind of helpful to know which ones are better and worse than the others. So without further ado, let's resolve that. Blessed Village. Village, but on gain you get a boon. I think that can't be better than D tier. The problem is just the boons are random. You don't know which one you're getting. There's some that are really good, like getting Flame's Gift early, or getting plus buy in the right context. But you have no way of knowing that. You can't buy this at the point in time where you would need it. And sometimes it just does nothing for you. You get Moon's Gift with an empty discard pile. And then once this card's in your deck, it is just pure vanilla village with nothing to recommend it over and above the other cards. And so it can be good, but I think it's too constrained to go above situational tier. Fortress, kind of same. The card can be A tier in the right case. You get a good trash for benefit card, and the recursion is great. But just in majority kingdoms where you don't have that synergy, this card is vanilla village, will be dead last on the list, and I don't think you can put a card that's dead last most of the time higher than D tier, even if sometimes it's really good. Hideout, easy A. It's a village. It trashes. It's even a pretty good gainer in kingdoms where you want curses. Just kind of does a bit of everything. The only argument I could see for keeping Hideout out of A tiers, you'll definitely hear some folks will say like A tier is reserved for a card like Wandering Minstrel or Hostelry. And from a power level standpoint, I get that those cards are obviously really good, but just on a methodological level, those cards do not count as villages. I'm not even that much of a stickler about this. Port, fortress, whatever. They're village-esque in nature, but you got to draw a line somewhere, lest you descend into thematic anarchy. And by no standard is a Wandering Minstrel a village. I'm sorry, I just cannot abide that. Not to mention, the whole essence of a tier list is a recognition that there's a natural teleological ordering of the cards that you're trying to identify. And this whole postmodern anything can be a village idea just, I think, flies in the face of that. So you won't see Wandering Minstrel ranked here. Next card, Village. Now you might think, similar grounds, Village doesn't qualify because it's not a $4 village. Common misconception that this actually is $4 village, just with the bonus being $1 of cost reduction, which is a pretty good effect. Cheaper things are pretty much always better. I don't think it can be as high as A tier, just because at 3 it's competing directly against silver, which is in every kingdom. That kind of holds it back, but generically pretty good. B. Workers Village. I guess you can go up to C tier. Obviously, the first one or two of these can be pretty good because it's plus buy, which is something you want. The trouble with Workers Village is just, Village is a card that you want a lot of, usually. Your whole engine runs on villages to play your smithies, to play your payload cards. And plus buy, in effect, with just very quickly diminishing marginal returns. You don't need the 7th buy in your deck. And so Workers Village, first few are good, but then pretty quickly approaches just vanilla village in value. And maybe you get one or two of these, but you're transitioning to any other village available if you can most of the time. And I think that holds it back a lot. Town, just kind of by the same logic, Town has to be a tier above Workers Village. It can be plus buy when you need it to, but it can be the village when you need it to. And you have that flexibility so that putting more of them in your deck still pays off. Port. Still E tier. So this card got buffed not too long ago. It was just so bad because it used to be you only get the second port if you buy it, not if you gain it with a workshop or something like that. And that was obviously a disaster. And so they changed it so that now if you gain it by any means, you get 2 ports. Which, that's nice. It definitely helps. But it doesn't really fix the fundamental flaw of the card, which is if it's a bad card and you just make it so that more often you get 2 of the bad card instead of 1 of the bad card, it's not really much of an upgrade. And the problem with port relative to all these other cards, it's still just a village. You're not getting any actual bonus except itself, which is question begging. The benefit is port. You first have to establish why port would be a good thing to get in your deck. I'd rather just have 1 good village than 2 bad ones. Farming Village. This one's an A. In terms of village quality, Farming Village is mediocre, maybe a B or a C. But Farming Village is just such a good big money enabler. And just you build a monolithic Farming Village money deck, and you'll find that you got your golds, you got your provinces, you can green early, and you're never going to find the provinces because Farming Village skips right past them and guarantees you consistently hit that treasure, and you're going to be hitting 8 really reliably, no matter how many green cards you shove in your deck. And I mean, this is kind of why the card got removed. Is it looks like a village that's going to encourage you to like build an engine and stuff like that. But what it actually encourages you to do is just rush the green cards and then not really build a deck. And that's just kind of overly centralizing in an unfun way. And so they yanked it from the set in second edition, and now it's getting replaced with Farmhands, which is a little bit more of an engine enabler. It helps resolve terminal collisions and stuff like that, which I think is definitely an improvement play quality wise. All right, next up we've got Village Green. Well, I mean, purely on a nominative determinism level, it's got to be in the green tier, which I think is probably where it belongs anyway. Village Green has two ostensible bonuses. You know, you can play it this turn or next turn, and you can play it when you discard it. But like, neither of those is any good. Oh, you can play it next turn is nice until you consider that means you have to play it terminally this turn to get that effect next turn. And if you're adding a village to your deck, the last thing you want it to be is a terminal action card, because the whole point of the village is to like resolve your terminal collision. So if you add this to play it terminally to benefit like the following turn, well, you need to add another village to support your ability to play this card terminally this turn to set up for the next turn. And you're in this catch-22 situation where you first need villages to play your village, and it's a bit circuitous when you get to get a card that provides you a village effect directly. And then the discard thing, I mean, that sounds nice. Like, oh, when I discard this, I get to play it. Except, just like, think about how often in the game you are voluntarily discarding your action cards. Like, that's just not a thing that comes up. Your opponent's cards, sometimes they'll like discard cards from the top of your deck, but a lot of those are like attack cards that would trash the village green anyway before you get to play it. The attack is going to resolve first. And so, both effects, I think, are just like too niche to make a whole lot of sense. Walled Village, I'd say it's a pretty solid B. It suffers from the same problem with Workers Village, which is that like if you have a bunch of these later in the game, the effect is not doing a whole lot for you. Like you get a bunch of action cards and stuff, and the Walled Village effect won't trigger. But in terms of like that first few villages, whereas plus buy early one is like fine, Walled Village's effect is a phenomenal effect. Like this is just like the best first village to buy, even if you transition to other villages later. Just like considering early in the game, one of the big problems you face is you have like two terminals in your deck. Do you add a village to help resolve that terminal collision? We don't know if they're going to collide yet. But even if you do, even if you think, oh, these two cards I have are likely to collide, if you add a village, what's the likelihood that you happen to draw that village in the hand that you need it with the two terminals? You know, it's just a big risk you're gambling on early on when deciding how many terminals to add versus how many villages. Walled Village fixed that problem. You just add it early, you know, as early as turn 1 on a 4-3 split, and you play it, and then it just top ticks itself on repeat every single turn until you need it. You find it with two other action cards. It resolves that early terminal collision, guaranteed, which is what you want your first village to do. And that's just a great effect. So first Walled Village, absolutely A tier. Obviously it falls off later, so it can't be an A tier, but pretty reliably strong. Mountain Village. This card, I think, you know, judging by its present value, is not great. It's often just a village. And picking a card from your discard pile instead of drawing from the top of your deck can often be worse than a village. You know, if you've been discard attacked or if you've been hit with a junking attack, your discard might be filled with bad cards. So not currently very good. But I think you got to bump this card up a bit just on kind of like potential value. I think it can get better in the future. One of the key things distinguishing Mountain Village from all the other villages is the plus actions resolves first before the plus cards, which potentially can be really significant. Purely hypothetically, imagine an expansion comes out in the near future where there are effects that trigger off of drawing a card, and you want your plus actions to resolve before you draw the card and create some uncertain chain of effects, like you play a snowy village or something and the actions shut off. And so that ordering of plus action before plus card, like currently, not a whole lot of strategic utility, but this is the sort of thing that, like, you know, future effects very easily could make Mountain Village pretty strong relative to some of the other villages. And yeah, I think it'd be pretty unfair to rank a card just on its past and present strength and not also account for future strength, just because scientifically I think that's a pretty dubious distinction to make given the relativity of simultaneity and all that. Penultimately, we have Mining Village. Pretty solid A tier, similar to Farming Village. As a village, it's alright, but as a money enabler, it's really strong. This card is basically just like Spices for $4, one of the stronger big money cards from the Renaissance expansion, where it's just, you know, it's like 2 money whenever you need it. You have these in your deck, you hit 6, you pop it, you hit a province, and you have that choice when to pop it or not. So you can save it up until you need it and then spike 8 kind of consistently. If you hit 8 naturally, don't pop your Mining Village that turn. And that Mining Village rush into early provinces is just kind of centralizing some of the time. Plus, you add a card like Grave Robber or Rogue that can get this back from the trash. It's a lot of strong synergies like that. I think puts Mining Village reliably in the top tier. And lastly, we have Villa. These cards have to be E tier. Obviously, the fundamental problem of Villa is it doesn't draw a card like every other card in this category does, and drawing cards is really good, especially for villages. One of the key things you want from a village is reliability. You want to find your village and your smithy early in the turn to kick off your deck, and then you find your next village, your next smithy. And if your village doesn't draw cards, that just gets way less likely. Just easy example, consider a hand with 3 villages and no smithies. That's still probably going to be a good turn. You play your villages, you're likely to draw into your smithies, which will draw your next smithy, and then you're good to go. A hand with 3 villas, that's a disaster. You've dudded. And I mean, you can tell they're kind of trying to design around that with the on-gain effect. It doesn't fix the villas in hand problem. But at the very least, it says, oh, you got smithies in hand and no villa. You can just buy the villa mid-turn and add it to your hand and resolve your terminal problems that way. And that seems all well and good. I'm sure everyone's tried that at some point, and you pretty quickly realize the problem you end up with, which is it's a bit of a vicious circle where I'll also add the smithies now and the villa later, but then because you built your deck that way, you have to buy the suboptimal non-drawing village to fix your short-term lack of terminal space, and then you passed up on a walled village, for example. And all right, well now, because your deck is full of smithy and villa instead of smithy and walled village, you dud again. Gotta buy a villa again. And you just end up trapping yourself in this deck that just gets worse and worse because you keep buying the bad long-term village because you need that short-term effect. It's a lot like you make a deal with a loan shark. It's oh, I need this money now. I've got this great short-term idea. I'll pay it back later. But then your loan comes due, and shockingly, you don't have the money anymore. So what do? You go break in your neighbor's house or something, and you steal their weed and sell it to pay off the loan shark. Well, now that you're selling their weed, you pissed off the local drug dealer because you're selling on their turf. They want a cut of the money. Well, now you got to pay them. Where's that money coming from? You rob a convenience store to pay the drug dealer. Well, you get caught because they got a security camera, and they got to pay bail. Where's that money coming from? And you get trapped in this cycle. I'm sure everyone's been there, and yeah. Villas like that. Don't rely on it to bail you out. Anyways, that's the tier list. As always, feedback is welcome. If you have any criticism, feel free to leave that in the comments as long as it's not too constructive. I don't want to compromise the independence of my rankings.